Welcome to BizConnect. For those of you who've attended a BizConnect, a Youth Entrepreneurs BizConnect in the past, you know that we have 3 goals. The first is to educate. And we have a pretty amazing piece of education tonight as we hear from one of our local entrepreneurs, of which we're so very proud here in the Wichita community. Our second, of course, is to showcase. Hopefully, some of you have had an opportunity to visit with the 3 or 4 of our students that are showcasing their businesses out there. Obviously, we want to showcase to you, the community, our businesses, and we want to showcase to you, our students, the community that's out there for you to partake of our goal number 3, which is networking. As you all know, networking, you've heard it in your class, whether you're in the class this year or in the class 5 years ago. You've heard the importance of networking, and I hope that you've taken the opportunity to meet somebody tonight that you didn't know. More times than not, we'll hear from our successful alumni that the reason they're successful is because they took an opportunity like this. They took an opportunity like this to go out and meet somebody new. And that person turned into a mentor for them, that then turned into the reason that they will tell you that today they are successful. So I can't stress enough the importance of meeting somebody tonight, getting to know somebody tonight, and who knows, that person could be your next mentor that's sitting across the table with you, ready to invest in your multi-million-dollar deal. And I definitely want to say that it was because of YE that happened, right? So thank you all. We really, really are very happy that you are here. Those of you that did participate in the networking tonight were challenged to participate in a scavenger hunt. If you filled out your scavenger hunt card and have not had an opportunity to turn that in, please turn it in. We should have some folks walking around. They're right there in the back. They're raising their hand. They will pick up your cards. Raise your hand if you need to turn in your card. And you probably ought to turn it in, because at the end of the night, I'm going to give away 2 $30 gift cards to Carlos O'Kelly's, to, of course, where Carlos O'Kelly's. How great was the food tonight? Let's have a round of applause for Carlos O'Kelly's. Thank you to all the teachers that came tonight. We appreciate your support, obviously. We couldn't do what we do without you. I saw several of you. It's extremely important that you're supporting these students as we're bringing them outside of the classroom. We love what you do in the classroom, and we just want to keep it rolling outside of the classroom. Thank you to all of you that are here tonight to support them. Would you mind standing if you're a Youth Entrepreneurs teacher? Big round of applause. Mr. Wright is standing over there. He's a teacher too. Okay, and finally, you know, we can't pull these types of things off without great people from the community that are willing to sponsor. And tonight's sponsor, hold on just a second, I gotta flip this page over, make sure I'm not forgetting something. Tonight's sponsor is Restaurant Management Company. And I'm so very proud that the president of the Restaurant Management Company is a part of the Youth Entrepreneurs Board. He's done some very amazing things. He's helped us tremendously just in the short time he's been involved with us, and he sponsored this event tonight. So first of all, I'd like for you to give him a round of applause. Secondly, I'd like you to give him your full attention as I welcome to the stage Mr. Hal McCoy II, President of Restaurant Management Company.
It's 1988, the summer before my junior year. A friend and I decided to start a business one day. We scraped together $100 each, bought 40 t-shirts, and paid my best friend to give us a screen design for it. We hired a bunch of college girls, gave them $1 each to go sell our t-shirts, and sent them off with everything we had in the world, not knowing if we had just thrown our money away or maybe started a business. That night, we sold out and had to start printing more. We were in business. And over the next 2 years, those 40 shirts turned us into the largest seller of shirts to students in Kansas. And so began the life I've had trying to act like an entrepreneur. I'm Hal McCoy. I'm the president and an owner of a restaurant management company here in Wichita. And I'm happy that they asked us to sponsor this evening, and I'm more happy that I got to meet some of you. At RMC, we run restaurants, mostly Pizza Huts in 9 states. And I hired a guy the other day, and I told him to go out and just ask people what they think about our company. And he came back and said, I was really surprised by the answer I got. He said, overwhelmingly, they told us that we had a spirit of entrepreneurship and that they were supposed to act like owners. So I guess that spirit of starting small and being an entrepreneur is still alive. And it is the one thing that we're most proud of. And I'm actually honored to sit on the YE board, and I'm very proud that that spirit of entrepreneurship was alive and well in this room with the students. I believe entrepreneurship is not just starting a business, but it's a way of thinking, acting, and even dreaming. And recently, I've become good friends with tonight's speaker, and I'm going to be nice to him this evening. Because like me, Jon is a second-generation entrepreneur. Actually, our companies have a history together. They started at the same time. His family and my family and another friend bought their first Pizza Hut together in the early 70s, way before you were born, sadly after I was. They took a risk and started something, and it bore fruit. I believe Jon brings to the table for his company a vision and a feeling of dreaming. Jon is a young guy, and he has a vision for a company, for what a company should look like for a new generation. He dreams big, but most importantly, he has the heart to follow that dream and follow that vision. I also believe what sets Jon apart from many is his desire and willingness to give back to his community. At a very young age, Jon became the chairman of Visionary in Wichita. That is a group that sets the direction for Wichita for the next century. Not only in his company, but on the boards that he sits and in his community, Jon brings that spirit of entrepreneurship that I believe is so needed in today's world. I know in his company and in the Wichita community, we are lucky that Jon shares that vision, his passion, and that entrepreneurial spirit. So, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend, Jon Rolph.
Hey everybody, what a great room, man. I love being in rooms with the next generation. It gives me hope. It's hope for the world. You know, one of the great things, and you see it really in high school, so as you see the classes change, and I was just talking to a group of juniors from campus earlier, you know, like I can remember being a junior and waiting for that senior class to leave so that we could, you know, be the seniors in the school, and how much really the culture of the school would change depending on what the tenor of the senior class was and who they were and what was important to them. And the world works that way. As generations come onto the stage and off of the stage, the world changes depending on what's important to that generation. So there's a continual hope in the next generation. And some people actually put us in the same generation. I'm 34. I was born right on the edge of Xers and millennials, and so I kind of consider myself a hybrid. Born in 79, I think the cutoff's between 78 and 82. So I can still remember the Cold War, but I also was the first class at Baylor University, Sick 'em Bears, that got issued a email address. So I know, I'm kind of ancient. I didn't own a cell phone until I was a junior in college. So I just share this spirit with you, and I'm just glad to be with you. So my thought tonight, I just want to be real. So I brought up a menu, and then this is all the notes I have, and it's really kind of fun facts about our business. So this is really my speech tonight. I know I'm making the YE people a little nervous, but I just want to tell you a little bit about who we are and how we got our start and what we're doing right now. And then I'll just tell you a little bit about the philosophy that we're trying to apply to what we're doing. And then we'll take questions. Does that sound good? Because I really am much more interested in speaking to what you are curious about and your natural curiosities. But first, let me say thank you to Hawaii, Kansas for the invitation to be here, to Hal for the generous introduction. Visioneering sets the vision for 15 years out, but 15-year century, same thing right now. And thank you all for coming. I want to thank Jason and Kelly and Debbie, the members of our team that put together the food out here. How'd it taste? Was it good? Yeah? That's great. And then, I just have some key people in my life here, some people I get to work with. There's a guy named Joe and Ryan in the back, in addition to the other folks that I mentioned. My parents are here, David and Barbara Rolph, and my sister Becky, or Rebecca, as she goes by in her adult life. So you'll find her on Facebook that way. So, but they're here tonight. Paula, who I work very closely with, is here, and the person who makes it all happen in my life, my wife, Lauren, is here tonight. We've been married 7.5 years, and she's carrying our 4th kid right now, and that'd be 4 and 5 years. So, if there's a saint in this room, she's sitting right here. So, and then I got some, I'm just feel really fortunate to have some friends like Hal and Ben and Chase and others here tonight too. It's the people in your life that really make it happen. It really is the relationships. I'm a huge believer in that. And so I'm just grateful that they'd be here in support of this. So just a couple, like I said, I'll do some fun facts about in the restaurant industry. So this is a Carlos O'Kelly's menu right now. If you walked in to any of our 4 stores in town, this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is the size. How many ingredients do you think we have to keep track of in our restaurant to be able to produce this menu? Yes, sir. 17. Okay. Other guesses? Any other guesses? Yeah. 20. 23. Yes, sir. 37. Okay, the answer is close to 450. How about that? Huh? You don't necessarily realize it, but you think about all the spices, you think about all the different things we put together to create these things. So like our refried beans, that people I think have a visual that they come out of some bag and you squirt them out and heat them up. We soak those things overnight, and I think they have over 17 ingredients in them, just our refried beans. So kind of a fun fact. So how many different ways can you order food or beverage at Carlos O'Kelly's? I'll throw that one out there. Yes? 300 different ways, yes. And this is the menu. Yes? 42. Yes, sir. 53. 45. Did I get your number wrong? Yeah, okay. Yes? 100. Do I have 101? Do I have 101? 101? 102? Yes. 500? We're getting closer. It is 3,200 plus different ways. If you think about all the different side combinations, then you can order enchiladas with cheese or with ground beef or with cheese sauce or red sauce or fuego sauce or poblano sauce or Diablo sauce or queso or no sauce, right? A lot of different ways to fix food. It's kind of complicated, kind of complex. It's just interesting. So the other thing I like to, when I think about what we do, just to give you some of the scope. So we've been around 32 years. So when we hit 30 years, we put together some statistics to our best guess, okay? So I'll just rattle through 3 of them. We think our servers at 30 years, we're now 32 years, walked over 238,000 miles just getting refills over our 32 years, right? That's a trip to the moon. Okay, we are pretty sure we've sold, or we've given away actually, because you don't pay for chips and salsa, 9 million gallons of salsa over 32 years across all our restaurants. And we've put 150 million pounds of ice into drinks, which is 6 times larger than the iceberg that sank the Titanic. There you go, how about that? We have about 200,000 plus people that walk into our restaurants every week. We have about 4,000 to 4,500 employees that take care of those guests every week. So that's what we do. We have 39 Carlos O'Kelly's across 9 states. We have 25 Applebee's, mainly in Iowa. We cross over into Illinois a little bit. So if you eat the Applebee's here, they are run by a guy named Jim Stevens who lives here in Wichita, a great guy. Ours are in Iowa, but we have the Carlos O'Kelly's. Now, a little background on how we got to where we are today. So my dad and uncle grew up in a small town north of Salina called Minneapolis. Who's heard of Minneapolis, Kansas? Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, go Lions. Long name, small town, right? Less than 2,000 people. My uncle was about 11 and a half, 12 years older than my dad. And he was a teacher in Great Bend. And one of the very first Pizza Hut franchisees was a guy out of Minneapolis. And he swung by and said hi to Daryl. And he said, "You wouldn't believe how much money I'm making selling pizza." Right? This is in the 60s or late 50s, early 60s. And so Daryl looked at that and said, "I think maybe I need to sell pizza." And went down to Wichita here, came to Wichita and met with the Carneys and got some territory in Iowa and packed up his life and with his wife, and they moved to Iowa, and they went to a campground and put their pop-up tent next to a telephone booth so they'd have a phone number they could give businesses as they were building their first pizza with their own hands. And you can imagine my aunt sitting there by a payphone in a campground answering it like a business whenever it'd ring, right? And so they were fortunate enough to be a part of Pizza Hut when Pizza Hut decided to go public for the first time. And so they threw in their Pizza Huts to be a part of the Pizza Hut IPO. And eventually my uncle became the national director of operations for Pizza Hut. And then as my dad was working in the Pizza Hut system at that same time, thinking that he was wanting to be a history professor, right? So my uncle was a science teacher. My dad was preparing to start his master's work to teach history. They talked. My dad was actually with my mom at that point in San Francisco running Pizza Huts. Was a regional manager for Pizza Hut at 23, saving up some money for school. They said, "Let's start opening pizzas together. I'm ready to leave the company." So they started opening Pizza Huts together in Virginia, eventually Florida. And so at that time, Pizza Hut realized they were making all these people all this money and they were spending it other places instead of with Pizza Hut. So they said, well, let's start another concept called Applegate's Landing. You guys won't remember that. We'll get people spending more money building up Pizza Hut type brands. This would be a casual dining, which is what Carlos Kelly's is. Sit down, you have a server, full service. And PepsiCo came in and bought Pizza Hut about a couple years after that program started. So there's 26. I think, was that how many were built? 26. I always have to ask him for sure I got my facts right. And they came and they said, hey, PepsiCo said, focus on pizza. We're going to close down this program. So we had two of those up in Iowa. And we said, well, what are we going to do with these two buildings? They're not going to be giving us the material to produce this. Do we want to carry on the name? It's moderately successful. And they actually had, at that time, decided to sell the one, and the deal fell apart. And our manager at the time and good friend who was running that Cedar Rapids, Applegate's Landing, said, hey, I grew up in Arizona. I know how to cook Mexican food. Chi-Chi's is just starting to take off. I think we can do it better than them. And so they all got in the kitchen and started playing with salsa and recipes and green chili and red chili and inviting their friends over to try it. And Carlos Kelly's was born. And people say, well, where'd that name come from? Well, like I said, my dad, wanting to be a history professor, knows a lot of random facts about history. And I guess if you actually look back, during the high point of Irish immigration, a lot of those guys joined the frontier army. Every Irishman loves a good horse and a good fight, right? And that's when they were chasing around Geronimo and all that around the Southwest. Those guys would live where they were stationed, and a lot of them married locals. And so there was a whole generation of kids named Jose Muldoon, Pedro O'Brien, or maybe even Carlos Kelly. So they made a list of names, not knowing they were going to be building this regional chain out of it, and their friends liked Carlos Kelly's best, and they had a restaurant. What's interesting, in that first year of that restaurant, this is not a story we usually tell publicly, but I said I'm going to be real. There was a gal who came in for a retirement party from teaching, and she ended up dying after eating at our place. And so the rumor got around that Carlos Kelly's had killed someone. Well, now, if it'd been us, there would have been a lot of other sick people, and there was no one else that was sick, right? So we knew it wasn't us. We take very good care of our food, and especially, we take very good care of our food. And I can go really far down that road. Ended up getting personally involved, and we were relieved of the responsibility of that, and our sales came back up, but our sales dropped by over 50% at that time. So you think about a budding business. So think about the different times Carl Kelly's could have fallen apart or never happened, right? When that business deal when the selling of that Applegate's Landing didn't go through, and so we had the restaurant and we decided to play. When you encounter something like that, like, you have to keep believing, okay? So when we converted those 2 Applegate's Landings to Carl Kelly's, our third one was in Topeka, and it was a loser. We were losing money like crazy, right? Another opportunity where we could have just packed in the bags, and Carl Kelly's would have been 2 restaurants, and we would have kept running Pizza Huts and been happy, right? But that's part of that entrepreneurial spirit. And it's a really important word to me is curiosity, right? They were curious, well, why isn't this working? Let's unpack it. Can we turn it around? What do we need to do? What would happen if we took this here? What would happen if we took it here? And pretty soon, we were building Carl Kelly's at 5 or 6 a year through the 90s. We sold the Pizza Huts in 94, bought into Applebee's in 99, started with 16. And they were owned by this major Applebee's. It was the biggest Applebee's franchisee at the time. And we got a little section of them, and 25, and they got the personal, or 16 at that time, personal care from us. And those restaurants really turned around. Now we have 25. And so that's how we ended up with 39 Carl Kelly's and 25 Applebee's. I came into the picture. I grew up around this business and had very little curiosity around it. I don't really know why. I heard about it all the time, right? Sitting at the table and going on trips with my dad, and you never went into a restaurant and had a normal experience, right? You're always dissecting it. So I wanted to be a movie director, right? So when I was a junior in high school, if you'd sat me down and said, "What do you want to do?" I would have said, "I want to make movies. I am going to impact our culture in the world through movies." You never have a captive audience for 2 hours anymore, except through a movie. And we've always communicated who we are through story. And so I went to Baylor, Second Bears, number 19 in the country, if you're counting. We'll win the Big 12 this year, I think. We won a Heisman a couple years ago. Did you know that? Anyway, I could go on about Baylor for a while too, but I'll spare you. I went and majored in film. I didn't take a single business class in college. Met some great people, made wonderful relationships, learned a lot. But I went and spent a year in DC, and one of the thoughts that I had on that year in DC was, before I go do whatever, if I go make movies or anything I do, I need to learn about people, and I need to learn about myself, and I need to learn about relationships. And so I spent a whole year focused on that. I was with a group called the National Student Leadership Forum on Faith and Values, and essentially a group of congressmen and senators got together and said, we talk about investing in the next generation, but how much time do you guys spend doing it? And they were like, we don't spend any time doing it. And so they said, well, let's start spending some time doing it. So a bipartisan group does this conference every year in DC, and we got to help facilitate that conference and do the follow-up with college leaders all across the country. And I really started learning a lot about leadership at that point. During that year, as I started to learn about people and I started to learn about myself, and I started thinking about the importance of relationships, I said, Hollywood can probably wait 1 year. I have a great opportunity to go work with my dad. He had never put any pressure, my mom, dad, never put any pressure on my sister I to get into the family business, had really encouraged us to pursue our own dreams. I'm very grateful for that. But I said, I have a great relationship with my dad. At that time of your life, you really start to experience the joy of having a peer relationship with your parents. I said, I get to learn business, get to be with my dad for a year and build our relationship. And that's how I ended up in the restaurant business. That was 11 years ago that I called my dad out of the blue and said, hey, what do you think about teaching me business for 6 months? I said 6 months at that time because I wasn't ready to commit for a year. And like most in our generation, I moved back in with my parents for a little while. And I started back working with Kelly Taylor in the West store, and started as a backline prep cook and spilled salsa on my feet and grease all over the floor and was really embarrassed, and did all kinds of stuff like that, and worked as a server and as a host and as a wait aide, and started managing restaurants. But for that first year, and especially the first 6 months, I was in restaurants almost all the time. And I got to work alongside the people that really had helped get to provide me most of the opportunities that I'd gotten to experience in my life. If we hadn't had a team like that at the West Wichita store and other stores, there's no way I would have been able to go to Baylor. There's no way I would have been able to experience a lot of things. And it was a real joy for me to get to work alongside people like that and learn the work ethic of being in those restaurants. And So 6 months, had a lot more to learn, said let's turn it into a year. After a year, said, well, hey, we're having a lot of fun, let's just kind of do it indefinitely, right? And so I started doing different stuff inside the business, a lot of different, did everything from breaking accounting packets to brand management. About 3 or 4 years ago, I realized, having the heir apparent inside the business who had never had a stated desire to stay inside the business was actually bad for the business. This isn't anything my dad said, hey, you need to make a decision, but I was realizing that I needed to say, is this what I want to do with my life, or do I want to go do something else? Do I still want to go to Hollywood? Do I want to pursue other dreams that I have? And so I really did some soul searching in that season. And what's interesting about that, I was probably right about 30 years old. I think a lot of people tell you when you're in college, you're going to figure out what you're going to do with your life, or right out of college, you got to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And I get mentored by this guy who's now 88. He was about 85 at the time. And so he was walking through that decision process with me, and he lost his wife of 40 plus years, passed away. And he was saying to me, here you are at 30 trying to figure out what you should do with your life, and I'm at 85 trying to figure out what I should do with my life. Because he'd not only lost his mate, but he'd lost his mission. He'd been her sole caregiver. So now he has time. What should he do? Right, so you're asking that question several points in your life. Take the pressure off a little bit right now as far as figuring out what you need to do, or what you want to do, or how you're going to commit yourself the next 40 to 60 years of your life. It's okay. So through some soul searching, I decided that this is what I really wanted to do, and made a commitment. And when I went to my dad and uncle and said, hey, this is what I want to do, they said, okay, why don't you run? Why don't you go with it? And I think within 45 days of that first conversation, I was the president of the company and running it, and trying to figure it out fast. And over that time, we've gone through some transition inside our organization, generational transition. A lot of my dad and uncle's folks were near retirement age. I was bringing in people that were members of my team. We've been through, which isn't easy to mold that over. And all this time, my dad and I have been able to keep our relationship, which has been really important to us, because it doesn't always work out that way in father-son businesses, and it doesn't always work that way for brothers who are working together. So here I am. I have a 32-year-old brand. Our team is working on trying to find out how we create another 32 years for it, because the average shelf life for a casual dining chain is 25 to 30 years. That's how long if they have a good run, that's how long their good run is. And so we're reinventing this right now. We're figuring out who we were. We're trying to change from the inside out. We're looking at every aspect of who we are and how we approach business. And it's really exciting, right? And it's hard, because in the 2 years that we've been doing this, a lot of our ideas haven't worked. And we've embraced this idea of, hey, let's fail fast and learn. But failure is not a problem, okay? We're not trying hard enough if we don't fail some. We're not experimenting hard enough if we don't fail some. But we get to have this joy of taking this wonderful brand with these wonderful people that we get to work with. So the average tenure for someone that's a general manager of a casual dining restaurant, they've been with their company about five and a half years, okay? For us, it's over 16 years that our people have been with us. We really feel like family. So we're trying to figure out how do we do this together to create a new life, and it's really fun. And that curiosity and creativity and passion and never giving up really are fueling us right now. And we picked a new direction. Inspired Mex is the direction we're going, and what we really feel like is there's plenty of traditional Mexican places out there that we want to play with creativity. So like the chicken picado that maybe you ate tonight, that's not something you can find at a normal Mexican restaurant, right? We got the idea for that when we were playing with Pizza Hut. We were in their test kitchen, and the person in the test kitchen said, hey, why don't you play with this butter garlic sauce? They gave us a bag of it. We've never figured out anything to do with it. We said, that would be really good with fajita chicken and sauteed green peppers and onions and Monterey Jack cheese and a tortilla. It's our number one seller today, right? Because we were willing to look outside of traditional Mexican. And so if you go in there today, you're going to find a burger, a cantina burger like Zubilee. That's what we did, was a burger with a Mexican twist. And you think about how limitless the possibilities are that you can do with this. One of our best new sellers right now is a barbecue chicken taco, which tastes like barbecue chicken pizza. But it's not necessarily traditional. But we have great traditional Mex. We start there. We like to think that we start where other people stop. And so that's where we're headed with the business right now, and all the ways that encompasses. But it's interesting trying to breathe new life into a concept that's been successful, but that's coming on the inside of its age wave. So that's what we get to do day in and day out. So part of the philosophy, just thinking about it, a couple of the key points that I'd like to make thinking about it, and I guess I'm supposed to be looking for my time somewhere. I don't know how bad I'm doing. Okay, good. I'm right where I need to be. It said 10 minutes, or maybe it said 100 minutes. I'll go with 100. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to be that boring. One is, so you think about how we got our start. So my uncle was a science teacher, right? They didn't have enough money to go buy a house up there and build it or rent a place. They had to go live in a tent and camp out next to a payphone. So how do you think they paid for that first pizza? Well, he went back to Minneapolis and pulled together some of the people in the community, a couple of the doctors, I think there's only 2 doctors in town, a couple of the lawyers, the insurance guy, and they said, hey, I have a dream about this pizza deal, and it's doing really well. Will you invest? And these people invested, and he went up. But why would they trust Daryl with that? It was his reputation, right? In a town that size, you have a reputation. And reputation matters when you start reaching out, and relationships matter. And so they knew he was a hard worker. They knew he was a guy that would work from dawn until dusk, that was a man of integrity, from seeing him work on other projects. So don't ever forget that reputation matters and that relationships matter. When I think about how my dad and I have been able to make this work now for 11 years, when we started, we made an agreement with each other. And we said that we will keep short accounts, okay? And what that means is when relationships typically dissolve, it's not one big thing that makes the relationship fall apart. I mean, think about your own friends, right? Sometimes one big thing can be the tipping point, but a lot of times it's little things that you never address that just kind of drips in a bucket, right? Oh man, he made that joke at my expense in the group. I need to get over it, right? Oh man, they left me out of this. I just need to get over it. It's okay. And we talk ourselves into saying it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal. And then over 3 or 4 years, which is the length of the average friendship, you don't really enjoy being around that person anymore because there's so many little things that were never addressed. And we said, well, we want to have a long relationship. We don't want the business to get in the way of our long relationship. And so we agreed no matter how incidental or how much we believed it shouldn't matter, if we hurt each other or embarrassed each other, we were going to tell each other. And really awkward at first. You know, hey, Dad, in that meeting, you made me feel kind of small when you made that joke. You know, and his response could be, oh, I'm sorry you felt that way. You know, why don't you grow some thick skin, you know? But the agreement we made was to ask for forgiveness, which is a deeper walk than just saying I'm sorry. And so through many conversations, and we still do it today, and it's really permeated our organization. I just did it with a member of our executive team yesterday. Hey, when you said this, it made me mad, you know? And I don't think it was fair. So let's figure it out. Let's talk it through. And when there's the promise that that's the way the relationship's going to work, I tell you, there's a lot more peace. There's a lot more hope, and there's a lot more growth in the relationship. And that's been really one of the secrets of how we've done this. And we both want to be people of love and respect, and so we try and love and respect each other more than the other one is us. If we have a little competition, that's what our competition is with each other. And it's working really well for us so far. The other thing is just thinking about our philosophy and our approach to business. And when you are inside of these classes for YE, and you're thinking about, okay, like I was walking around looking at the boards, okay, what money is it going to take to come up with this? What kind of money am I hoping to make? What's my spreadsheet look like? What's the flow through? What am I going to do with this extra capital or these returns that are coming? Visible capital is really important inside a business, okay? It doesn't work if you're not producing a return. What we believe in is that equally important is invisible returns. Okay? So it's a little different way of thinking about things. Let me give you the foundational thoughts of it first before I unpack it. When we think about what's going to matter to us in the end, all right, when we're at our 80th birthday party and our friends are around giving speeches about us, our coworkers, our family members, what we hope that they'll say, when we think about our funeral and what we hope will be said at our funeral, it rarely has to do with the visible returns. They made this much money. They grew from 40 Carlos Kelly's to 400, right? And what's so funny is at especially your stage of life, the question you get asked all the time, and you're going to get asked more, is what do you want to do? Right? What do you want to do? What do you want to produce? What do you want to do? It's the second question you ask someone when you make them, usually when you meet them, is, hey, what's your name? What do you do? Right? And so there's this kind of strange switcheroo that happens out there, because we don't talk about, so who are you trying to become? Why are you wanting to do what you want to do? Right? And how we answer those questions have a lot more to do with what we want people to say about us at our 80th birthday party, a lot more to do with what we want people to say about us at our funeral. But we spend so little time talking about it. It's about, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you doing? Where's your career going? Right? A lot of my friends who are in their early 30s, where's your career going? Your 30s, this is the time you got to build your career. What are you doing? Right? You don't even have time to think. Like when I spent that year in Washington, I had this morning that I woke up that I realized I did everything I did. My why was because I was supposed to. There was no deeper purpose in it than that. It was depressing for me. Right? But you can see how it happens, right? You're in high school, hey, you should try and go to college. If you can go to college, you should try and find a job. When you find a job, you should try and find a spouse. When you have a spouse, you should try and start a family. When you got a family, you should try and further your career. And all of a sudden, you're 40 years old. Right? And you say, what have I been doing with myself? I feel very fortunate that I woke up at 23 and sat there and said, what am I doing with myself? And I had experienced a lot of success. I was student body president twice at Baylor. I got to go to this elite program in Washington. I was doing all the right things. And I got out there and applied myself. But I started thinking, I need to have a deeper purpose. Right? I need to think about who I want to become. I think about it sometimes. I have a general idea, but I've never written it down. I've never told anybody else. There's no one asking me if I'm becoming that kind of person. Right? And life moves through seasons, and business moves through seasons. Hal's got to pick up his daughter, or I just really made him mad. I don't know which one it is. A round of applause for Hal real quick, everybody. But was this deeper reason? I totally lost my train of thought on that. I'm sure you guys did too. And so that's all. I'll take questions. No, I'm just kidding. But it's connecting with this why, okay? And starting to think about who you want to become. Those are almost more important than the who you want to be. Because I tell you, than the what you want to do. Because I can tell you, for most of my friends, what they thought they wanted to do when they were in high school, and even most of them, what they thought they wanted to do when they were signing up for their degree in college, ended up being something different. But the who they wanted to become and the why they wanted to live every day and apply themselves every day became much more important. I really believe we're these beautiful mysteries as people. We never figure ourselves out. We're always changing and entering into those questions about who we want to become and is what I'm doing helping me become that person, and your why. Those things can morph over time, and they should morph over time a little bit. But then you're starting to go into what I think is the most fun part of life, which is the introspective life a little bit. And starting to figure out this beauty that's inside of you, this mystery that's inside of you. And so how does that apply to business when I talk about invisible returns? So what's our why? Is it just to make more money? Is it just to build more restaurants? We need to do those things. It's an and both, okay? Don't get me wrong. But if that's all, I can't tell you how many people that you would say have been successful that feel empty in the end. I had some friends that were the chaplains for the Washington Redskins back in the early 90s when they won the Super Bowl. And they did it for several years, and they told me the hardest day for the players that they ever experienced wasn't when they had a friend die or a player experienced a season-ending injury or things like that. It was the week after they won the Super Bowl. that was the hardest week for those guys. Now you ask yourself, well, why is that? Well, think, since those guys were in pee-wee football, that was their dream. And they go, and the confetti falls, and they hold the trophy, and they wake up the next morning, and they say, is that all? Is that all? What have I been about? You know? It's really, I've heard other people describe it to me in business as you see this ladder against a wall and you think it's leading somewhere, and so you climb it your whole career and you get to the top and you realize it was just leaning against a wall. It wasn't going anywhere. You know, I have a friend who just sold his business, it's getting announced this week, for $500 million. Okay? He started it from nothing. Just an idea he had in college. Right? And I have heard him say, I have been successful, but I have done nothing significant. Well, what's that mean? You build a $500 million company, you don't think that's significant? Well, that should speak to something, that there is something deeper than just making the money and growing the business, right? And I think about what costs some people experience when they pursue just the visible returns. I think about a guy who I know that built a major international company, right? It was $1 billion company. And he realized, oh my gosh, I have no relationship with my wife and I have no relationship with my daughter. And so he came home to him one day and he said, I'm going to leave the business. I need to spend more time with you. And I'm not lying. This is what they said. They said, we made a trade a long time for you. We decided we'd take the money and the convenience and let you go be with the business, and we don't want to trade back. All right? It can be a very appealing and looking facade when you see people experience the success on the visible returns, but it doesn't necessarily make life any easier. It certainly doesn't make life any more meaningful, and it certainly doesn't make it any more joyful necessarily. There has to be something else. And so the way we apply our business, we talk about things like people are a legacy, right? So we catch a lot of people moving from here to there. I just met a gal who's a new member of our team over at the West Wichita store, right? I don't think she's probably going to end up with a career in the restaurant industry. Just be my guess. Most people don't. It's fun to think about just under 10% of the state of Kansas is employed in the hospitality industry in some way right now, right? But whatever she goes and does, we get a chance to teach her something about business, about something deeper, right? I tell this story because I just had this happen. A friend of mine called me and said, hey, we just celebrated my daughter's graduation from med school at KU, and we went to Carlos and had a great experience. I said, oh, why'd you pick Carlos? And said, well, she worked at the Iowa City location when she was doing her undergrad in Iowa for 7 years. I said, thanks. I pick up the phone and call the Iowa City manager. I said, hey, Bruce, I just heard that a gal that you had for 7 years just graduated from med school. And he goes, oh, that's great. And I said, yeah, you trained a doctor on their bedside manner for 7 years. That's more training they got in med school. Yeah. And so it's just interesting to change the perspective on what you're doing and not to lose this thought about who you want to be as a company, who you want to be as a person inside of that, because you will go through seasons of success and failure, and they will test you in different ways. You think of a 2-liter pop bottle. You know, when you crush that thing, you're testing its weaknesses in a totally different way than if you blow it full of air, right? But if you can have an idea of what your why is going into it and who you're trying to become, you will go through those seasons on the trajectory where you will have a bountiful harvest at the end of your career, meaningful relationships with the people that are important to you, right? A meaningful legacy that you were there for people when they needed you. And you'll have a heart that's full of joy at that age, right? You guys have met plenty of people who are at that age, and you see bitterness as a dominant deal. So they didn't care for their most precious asset, right, a lot of times. They weren't willing to reconcile or to forgive. So that's our approach to business. That's what we do. I have no idea if I'm out of time. I've got the 0 Q&A. So anyway, thank you guys for entertaining my thoughts. I'd love to get your questions. That's good. The answer is 6. Any questions? Yes? My mom is from Iowa, and she's really the queen of Newton. And no, I'm just kidding. She is from Newton, Iowa. It just happened that we just, for some reason, we're drawn to that territory. We're Kansas folks. and now we're Iowa folks because of my mother. But that's where the Pizza Hut territory was that Daryl could get his hands on, and he knew that territory because he'd gone and harvested grain and built silos and things up there. And then that's where the Applegate's Landing territory happened to be. That's where the first Carloses were. The people of Iowa are great. They're a lot like Kansans in their nature, and we just really love the people of the Midwest. So that's how we ended up so much heavy up there. Yes, sir. Yeah, he asked if, you want me to just repeat the questions? Yeah. He asked if we, first question was how we end up so heavy in Iowa, and that we were actually bidding on Applebee's in South Carolina at the time the Iowa deal came up. So it's been fortuitous and serendipitous, to use a couple us words. But so have we ever thought about doing something else? Yeah, we talk about it all the time. We're actually playing, so I'll test this idea here. We play with the idea of a sports cantina. So think of a Buffalo Wild Wings with tacos as the center of the menu instead of buffalo wings. That's kind of one of the ideas we're playing with around right now. We're talking, we have about 3 or 4 different things, but yeah, it's fun. That creative energy is always going on inside of our business. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So you guys created Carlos and bought into Applebee's.
Yep.
Is there any food industry businesses that you see right now that are on the rise or that you might want to do?
Yeah, so he asked where do we see, what's basically on the rise instead of the food industry. You guys are driving a lot of this actually. So the fastest growing segment of our industry is fast casual is what it's called. So think of Chipotle, think of Panera. That style of restaurant where you go to counter service, pay for the food, you don't have to tip a server, you can go in looking however you want, you can leave whenever you want. That is the fastest growing sector. So we talk a lot about that. There's a lot of people getting into that. There's a big boom right now in fast casual pizza actually, where you go pick your toppings, goes through an oven in 3 minutes. There's one opening here soon. So yeah, that would be the growing side of our industry right now. Still, though, it's only like 6% of the total food dollar goes to that. You'd think it'd be more, but anyway. So, other questions? You can be as personal as you want, or ask me to be. Yes? Biggest success and biggest failure? It's an interesting question. Okay, I said I'd be real. I'd say biggest success so far for me personally, and you heard me talk a lot about it tonight, is that I've been able to maintain a intimate relationship with my father. You know, that we know each other, that we still like being around each other, we like spending time with each other, and that I've got a growing and encouraging relationship with my wife. So in pursuing the business, I haven't had to give on either of those things. And I'm still excited to come home at the end of every day and, love taking dates with my wife and things like that. So I consider both of those big, big victories right now. Failure, coming out of the gate, we did, it was in the paper a little bit, we did 3 remodels last year, spent over $200,000 a pop. I mean, they were big bets. And one of the 3 worked. All right, so very public embarrassment for me personally inside the company and around. I get asked about those a lot. I got asked about them tonight by someone. But it fits in the criteria with what we're trying to do. We're going to try bold things. We're going to try and figure it out. We're not going to be afraid of failure. We're just going to fail fast and learn. So we didn't let our pride say, well, it was the management team or it was this location or we said, hey, what we're doing is not working. All right, let's go back to the drawing board. And so we've now spent 9 months reworking what we're doing with our remodeling plans, but we don't stop, we keep going. But I've had to, publicly in front of all our managers say, hey, I told you this was going to work and it didn't work, but that means we keep going. And I just think, you got to embrace failure. You really have to inside a business. It's okay. Usually that's where the best things come from. A lot of the best businesses and ideas come from times in recession and things like that. So, any other questions? Yes? Other than food choice, so there's a lot of similarities, you know, so you think about, so he asked what's the difference between Applebee's and Carlos besides, you know, you can get riblets at Applebee's and a fajita, well, I guess you can get fajita either place, a chicken picado at Carlos and Kelly's, which is really delicious, and I think maybe you guys should go try and eat tomorrow night. There's a lot of differences, so especially, this is the biggest one, I think, that's a national brand. Okay, so as we've gone through this recession, Carlos has taken a much harder hit than Applebee's. Applebee's, because they spend millions and millions of dollars every year on television advertising. So they're very top of mind. You see them all the time. If you watch football, you remember the Chris Berman spots, all that stuff. So the little guys, Carlos, which is an independent, doesn't have the money to do that, right? So they're at a very high presence, national brand, national presence, which helps you wear through the hard times a little better. But Carlos has more personality, in my opinion, being smaller, family owned, and operated, you know, and we get to play with it. You know, Applebee's kind of comes, they say, hey, here's your menu, you need to execute it, so your goal is to operate it as well as you can to keep people coming back, but you rely on the folks in Glendale, California to create the strategic direction. Well, with Carlos, we get to do that. And so a lot more creative energy, fun energy goes into that. So I think I have time for 2 more questions. I don't know who to pick. I'm going to go with you.
If you could do your life over, would you still get your film degree even though you couldn't really go anywhere with it?
Yeah, I think I would. So she asked if I had it to do all over again, would I get my film degree again? And yes, the caveat is I'd take more business classes. It was a steep learning curve for me. I didn't know what capital was, or hardly could figure out a P&L or things like that. You know, when I got into the business, it was a little embarrassing because I grew up, you know, around a huge business. And I got into the business, everybody assumed I knew everything about it. My first shift, I was supposed to be a manager. The manager calls and says, hey, I'm sick, you can handle it. I'm like, I've never managed a shift before. You know? I guess you assume I got it. No, I think, you know, with a lot of life experiences, my thought is, you know, I wouldn't go through and repeat some of the hard times again, but I wouldn't necessarily give them up either because they've made me who I am. And that experience and getting into the creativity of film and storytelling, all that's important inside of business. Creativity and storytelling and moving people and speaking to a heart rather than just a head, you know. So yeah, I'd do it again. I loved what I did. It was a great experience. So that guy had his hand up really high. Yeah. You know, it's different market to market. So in Wichita, right, we're a big market for us. We're in a lot of smaller towns. So you got On the Border, you got Abuelos, and then you got all the ma and pa type places, right? In a lot of our smaller towns, we're the only Mexican casual dining place in town. So you go up to Salina or you go out to Hutchinson. When we test with we do a quiz with our guests, they'll say, if you weren't here, where would you be? It'd be Applebee's, right? So in a lot of our markets in Iowa, we're competing with ourselves. And there's no doubt over the last 4 years, we've seen some of our guests go from Carlos to Applebee's. We can see it on the sales sheet, right? But really what we're experiencing is a big splintering inside of our industry as it's become a mature industry. It used to be through the 80s and 90s that literally they just built restaurants to keep up with the demand. And then in the early 2000s, the number of women entering the workforce leveled off, and so did dining occasions at the same time. But we were built for growth, so everybody kept building, and it got overbuilt. So when 08 hit, it just devastated the industry. Something like 13,000 restaurants closed in 2 years. But now there's a lot of different choices. So on some occasions, we'll compete with Chipotle. On some occasions, it's On the Border. On some occasions, it's La Azteca. You know, it just depends. So it can be hard when you're creating a national strategy to know what you do in different markets because the competition is actually a little different. I'll answer one more question. I'll answer 2 more questions. These 2 guys. You know, coming up with new ideas isn't hard. Coming up with good new ideas is hard. So, like, I'm thinking about a meeting we had last night. I'm like, you know, it's coming up to the winter. Why don't we serve a hot margarita? And everybody's like, a hot margarita? I don't think I'd order that. You know, so, like, that's an idea, right? But you gotta play with it and come up. So I think the hard part about the creative process is you got to give it time. you know, and so and you have to give it space. So you can't just get in and say, hey, we're figuring it out in the next 15 minutes. But at some point, you have to say, hey, we're figuring it out by this date. You know, as we work through this rebranding stuff, I was talking to someone who's really specialized in it, and they said, hey, just stop waiting for it to come down from you from heaven on a golden platter. Sometimes you just got to make a decision and move forward on it. So the idea process, we try and have a really creative and curious environment, and so the ideas are coming a lot. But you know, it's identifying how do you tell an average idea from a great idea. That's the really tough thing. You usually tell the difference between a bad idea and a good idea. And so we try and figure out, is this going to be average or is this going to be great? Yes, sir. Can you say that just a little louder for me?
Are you guys thinking about expanding into smaller areas where your business has not touched?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting question for us. It's different for Carlos and Applebee's. We've been one of the lead franchisees in the country as far as experimenting with small town units for Applebee's. It's part of why Applebee's was more successful than Ruby Tuesdays and Chili's and things like that, because they went to the small towns first. And so then the other people started coming, so they started looking at smaller towns. So we ended up in places like Waverly, Iowa, and things like that. But now with increased competition, we're actually needing a larger base, not a smaller base for Carlos than we used to. Applebee's is doing okay as long as it's a regional draw. But yeah, we look, I mean, since we're so predominantly Midwest, the small towns are really important to us, and so we're looking at them all the time. And a lot of them, most of them are really pleasant surprises because they draw from such a wide area rather than just the town. And I promised I'd do this. I eat at Coca Dulce at least twice a week, and it's great artisan chocolate, and Beth Tolley's right here. Anyway, it's inspired chocolate. Okay, anyway, thank you guys very much for the time. Joe, did you have a question back there? That's the last hand I saw. Or is that? Oh, who has that? Yeah. Jon, okay, so he said, I've done a lot in the community. What's Jon Rolph's vision of Wichita look like in the future? You know, I'm hopeful for our town. We've gone and visited a lot of different cities. I'm going to Des Moines next week with a group from Wichita to look at some of the things they've done. We have a great history to build on. It's important, your tradition and your history. Our business leaders and the people in the community have shaped the direction for the city for a long time, right? We haven't just abdicated to that to some strong mayor or some politician. And so we have this DNA in us to impact the direction of our community. And there's no one that's going to come save Wichita or tell us what direction we need to go. The national government's not going to do it. Kansas isn't going to do it. And you shouldn't rely on the city and county either. We have to do it. That's what I loved about visioneering. And as I got in with the public, we have dreams. And we're good people. We're hardworking people. There's a lot to build on. We just have a lot of trouble getting in lockstep together. We argue a lot. We argue more than, and there's a healthy degree of arguing, but sometimes we just need to say, hey guys, this is the direction we're going, and we're going to move forward. So to me, I think it's vibrant. I think we engage the river more. I think our downtown is growing. There's been a lot of investment in that in the last 3 or 4 years. So you start to have a greater identity, a greater doorstep. I think entrepreneurial programs like this create a great spirit of continuing our strong history of entrepreneurism. And so the real employers and businesses of the future are probably sitting in this room. You know, and it gives me hope. We have good people, and when you have good people and a vision, a lot of great things happen. So that would be my question there. We'll end on that. Thank you guys very much for your time coming tonight. Really enjoyed it.
So Jon, we have an inspired cactus for you, as well as one of our Youth Entrepreneurs alum. They're called Chimney Wicks, East High. These are fire starters that are scented, and she's selling these now at her Etsy store. So,
well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Would you like to stay and help with the drawing?
I'd be glad to do that.
You just want to hang tight for a second? So inevitably, when I go off script, I forget something. And earlier when I got up here, the one thing I forgot to tell you all was who I am. I'm Kylie Stupka. I'm Youth Entrepreneurs Executive Director, so I apologize for saying that. We're so very proud to have had Jon here tonight. Did you all not enjoy those comments? Two last orders of business, and then we'll send you home. But before we do, I want to remind you that we'll have another BizConnect coming up in the spring. So mark your calendars, we'll get that information out there. We'll also have Y Academy events that'll be happening kind of throughout. Keep a look on the website. There's lots of things that we'd like to get you involved in. Stay in touch with us. I challenge you that every time I'm in front of you. Do it, stay in touch with us, and hopefully we'll get you in front of more folks like John and the other great folks in the room. Don't leave yet. We got to announce who gets these great Carlos O'Kelly's gift cards. And let me guess, you're going to go eat some chicken piccata?
Chicken piccata.
Chicken piccata, aren't you? Right? Here we go. John?
You have my permission to get barbecue chicken tacos too, eventually. All right, here's one.
All right. Travis Diffrenbaugh, Campus High School. Oh, this is who we met. Guess who we met, everybody? Okay, next one. Mallory? Mallory David, Cape and Mount Carmel. There she is. She talked to Melissa and Josh, and she met an alumni who is planning on opening her business. The lessons she learned can be used in the future. Good job, Mallory. We'll let her come up. All right, that's it. Everybody drive careful tonight. Thanks for coming out. Enjoy your evening.